Welcome to today's episode of the Normalized Surrogacy Podcast from Surrogacy Mentor. I'm your host, Carey Flamer-Powell, experienced gestational surrogate, surrogacy agency founder, and owner of Surrogacy Mentor and Modern Parent Mentor, where our aim is to help surrogates match with reputable surrogacy agencies for a safe, ethical, and enjoyable surrogacy journey. Today, I'm happy to welcome our special guest, founder of International Surrogacy Center, Maria Valencia. Welcome, Maria. So happy to chat with you. So before we get into our topic, which today is nightmare cases in surrogacy, I want to give a little bit of background about Maria. So Maria is a visionary leader in the field of assisted reproduction. With a bachelor's degree in business and a passion for helping others, Maria has dedicated her career to supporting individuals, couples, and surrogates on their journey through surrogacy through 2001, when she began working in the field of assisted reproductive technology. Under Maria's direction, the professional staff at ISC is committed to providing exceptional customer service and making surrogacy a unique and enjoyable journey. Maria also serves as the chair of the Society for Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy's mentorship program, where she provides guidance, support, and mentorship to new agencies. So yeah, you've been around for a while in the industry and you do a lot of amazing things. So we're super excited to chat with you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and share.
Yeah, so tell us, just to get us sort of started, just give everyone that's listening, assume they don't know much about surrogacy or they're just starting to learn about surrogacy. Give us sort of like the 2-minute refresher course on what is the agency's role in a surrogacy journey? What is it that you actually do?
2 minutes, right?
Right?
So, as an agency, our job is to help the parents and the surrogates. And it's help them guide to, first of all, find them the perfect match. I feel like it all starts there,
Mhm,
making sure their values, their thoughts about the journey, communication styles, they both align.
mhm,
If you can make a good match, you will most likely have a pretty good journey.
mhm,
That's likely to happen. And that's one of the main roles of the agency is finding these unique individuals that can work together and build a friendship through,
mhm,
15, 18 months, 2 years. That
mhm.
is one of the primary goals. And I feel like sometimes people forget that's a huge value and asset that the agency has that
Yeah.
for a surrogate, you come in and we have, 20, 30, 40, 50 couples we can find her the right match. Same with
Mhm.
the parent. There isn't just one size fits all type of deal. So
Yeah.
that's one of our main goals as an agency. The second is making sure that we're there to support and guide them through challenges.
Mhm.
As we know, anything can happen in surrogacy, for either parties, and they still have their own lives that they're
Mhm.
bringing into this journey. So
Right.
as an agency, our job is to help them facilitate that journey and make it as enjoyable as possible. Help them guide them through any issues or conflicts they're having, communication issues, to make sure that both enjoy the journey and they have a healthy baby because both the surrogate and the parent want the same goal. And I
Yeah.
think and it just to me, that's what's important. It's the
Mhm.
matching and being able to provide that support to
Mhm.
both parties, not just to one side.
Mhm.
It's both parties the same. And make
Mhm.
sure as an agency, we stay always neutral and they
Mhm.
both feel that, that extreme support that we should offer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so you're really coming into it from the very beginning on both sides, right? You're starting with the surrogate when she's first starting her process, and you're starting with the parents when they're first starting their process. And then you're seeing the entire thing all the way through. So you're there for A to Z
Correct.
and all of the case management that comes with that, all the behind the scenes work that has to get done to keep all these different moving parts moving, right?
Absolutely. And I do feel that and I felt this maybe in the last year or two, I feel like sometimes there's people that don't value the agency's role and how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me makes me, obviously makes me a little sad, but also I feel like they just don't understand.
Yeah,
They just don't get it that of course everything will be great when things are great, but
right.
things happen. Everybody's a human and there
Mm-hmm.
could be issues, not even issues that you caused, something that happened in your life that,
Mm-hmm.
was life changing and affected the journey. And those things are what an agency's for to help support lawyer, case manager, that all the parties to help guide you mitigate these, normal life changes and issues that
Yeah.
can happen. So
Yep.
it does. I feel like that's an important thing to say is how the agency's role is so important. Of course, there's good and bad agencies like in
Mhm.
every business,
Mhm.
of course. And that's why I appreciate so much that there's some, an organization like Seeds that we can all be held accountable for our
Mhm.
actions and how we're behaving.
Right. So that's a good segue into what we're talking about today, which is that when things are great, they're great, but things don't always go great, right? Because we're talking about humans who have lives and families and jobs, and we're talking about uncontrollable factors where, we all can do our best, right? But then at the end of the day, we just sort of hope that all of the pieces fall in place and that all of the medical processes work out, and they don't always. So tell us about a case that you would consider a nightmare case that you've experienced as an agency owner.
Mhm. I'll share one that comes to mind, and this is again discussing that it's not about anything we could have preemptively thought about as an agency, that
Hmm.
things that just happen and life happens. And it was a case where this surrogate, a married surrogate, was in a journey
Hmm.
with a single intended parent. That's not really relevant, but also point out that he was single.
Hmm.
And she was about 15 to 18 weeks, under 20 weeks. And she found out that her husband was being unfaithful and she was leaving him. And that was extreme. I mean, you can only imagine how she felt and what she went
Yeah.
through. And that impacted the journey, her relationship with the clients, her ability to like process things or think, which we completely understood what she was going through, but it really got dragged out. And at times, the parent felt like she was putting herself in danger, which she might have, but she was going through so much trauma and so much heartache that it was difficult for her to see. And it was a very difficult case to navigate because you have both parties that have really high emotions in this journey, of course, and adding that sort of thing happening to you, it involves your relationship, your children, and now you have to worry about this baby you're carrying. And that's just life things that happen. So sometimes when parents come to us and try to mitigate everything, we tell them that's impossible. That is, we're humans, things happen. And we supported the surrogate as as much as possible because we understood what she was going through and we had to be compassionate through her and understand that she wasn't thinking rationally. She was so emotional. It was so difficult for her. So it got dragged out for about 2, 3 months. It was very hard. There was a bit of back and forth with her husband, which we supported and understood, but it was very difficult for the client and her behavior changed. She wouldn't communicate with them as often because she had so much going on. It was difficult for her.
Yeah.
And that's where the agency's involvement was so important for her to feel that support, but still give her the space.
Hmm.
And I think as a parent, normally when something's going on with your surrogate, you just want to be overbearing. And I think
Hmm.
that's just a natural instinct. They want to just, well, let me call her out more often. Let me check in more often. Like you
Yeah.
worry more. So you want to communicate more instead of acknowledging that she knows better. I'm just going to give her some space and let her deal
Hmm.
with it. The parent's approach was not that.
Hmm.
And they had a very difficult time that they needed to just back off and let
Hmm.
her give her space.
Right.
And it got really bad because they called their attorney,
Hmm.
and of course, they vented on everything that was going on. Legally, the surrogate wasn't in a breach. She was following
Hmm.
her contract, going to her appointments, but the communication really changed.
Yeah.
So the minute they call their attorney, of course, things can get a little bit more messy. So as an agency for us, if it doesn't involve a legal issue, we try to deal with it internally. We
Hmm.
don't try to immediately call the attorney and get them involved. If we can handle it, we can involve a mental health professional and help us mitigate it. We'll do it that way because
Hmm.
we have felt and I believe learned that the minute you have both attorneys get involved, for some reason, things tend to go worse.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen it where, "Oh, this was a great idea to do."
Right.
In my experience, it hasn't been that way. Of course, there's things that legally we have to,
Hmm.
involve them if it's a legal issue. But if it's something like this, I think it would have been better for them to allow us to mitigate it internally with the
Yeah.
agency. But I think the parent felt like they were losing control, and that was a big
Mhm.
problem, and they were losing the trust in the surrogate. So that was an incredibly difficult and challenging journey. And at
Mhm.
the end, it didn't end well. The
Mm.
parent was so bitter that even though when things got better for her and it was more stable, and she did end up breaking up with her husband and they ended up through a separation divorce, she was in a better place towards the end of the journey and apologized, but it didn't matter to the parent at that point. They were
Mhm.
so hurt
Mm.
and bitter that they couldn't let go of that. And
Gotcha.
they were not in the delivery room only because it was a very it was not a good environment for the
Mhm.
surrogate. So it wasn't that she didn't want them there.
Right.
It just wasn't going to be a healthy thing for the delivery for that to happen.
Right.
And they ended up not speaking to each other, which it was a total shame.
Mm.
And it's difficult because, as an agency, you shouldn't pick what side is right or wrong. But I understood how the parent was very hurt because it wasn't the journey they expected. But
Mhm.
they also did not understand that she is a human. Things happen. She's in a relationship. I mean, anything can happen.
Mhm.
And they were not very understanding. They couldn't forgive that, even though she
Mhm.
asked, please, I'm so sorry. I apologize for my behavior. So it was such a bummer. It shouldn't have ended that way, and things could have been better.
Yeah, I mean, that's always so hard because, again, this is human nature, like you said. I heard you say that the surrogate had some mental health support. Was the parent offered some mental health support?
And they refused it.
They
So
refused it.
after that, we were more careful on how we worded our agreements with them because now it's worded where the agency can require them to attend,
Yeah.
both parties, because sometimes when you're in the middle of this, you don't realize what you need. And I
Right.
think if he would have been to, talk with a mental health professional, things might have been a little different. But as an agency, we didn't have the ability to ask. We asked for that, but to require it,
Yeah.
where that made us learn, as an
Mhm.
agency, it made us learn, okay, we need to change that because we need to have the ability to say, we require this part of our program that you have to attend if these things are happening. And now it's more well worded.
Mhm.
If certain life things happen, that we can ask for that.
Right. Yeah, that's hard because, you can only offer certain things. And I mean, technically, at the end of the day, even if a contract says that you are required to do something, you don't have to do
You
it. You can
don't
just
have to
be a
do it.
brief,
Correct.
right? But we hope that as an agency, you can offer these resources and that they're accepted and that it helps get you to the other side of the situation. But like you said, it doesn't always happen. And it's unfortunate that it ended that way. But, it sounds like as an agency owner, you did everything you could and supported everyone as best as you could. And it's just one of those situations where no one could have seen this coming. And you have to deal with it in the moment the best that you can on
Right.
all fronts.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I consider it myself a nightmare case only because it was awful for everybody involved.
Yeah.
In every way. It was awful for the parent because they didn't get the journey they wanted. It was awful for the surrogate for what she was put through during a pregnancy. It was awful for the agency to have
Hmm.
to mitigate it both and make sure that we were supporting both parties equally.
Hmm.
And that was in itself just difficult to make sure they both felt fully supported by us as an
Hmm.
agency.
Hmm.
Because we always want to be very careful never to pick a side. That's
Hmm.
not our job here. It's not to pick a side. And I think that's something that's not discussed enough as an agency. I think every party feels like you're picking the other's side, and that's not true. I mean,
Right.
a good agency, as you know, will stay neutral and will support their client
Hmm.
and their surrogate the same way.
Right.
Mhm.
Definitely. Your nightmare case reminds me of one I had as an agency owner where we had a surrogate who went through all the screening. Everything was great, passed psych, had a great psych with her husband, and we matched. And right as she was entering legal, she found out that her husband had basically been living a double life and was
Oh,
not only cheating, but was on drugs.
oh,
And he showed up one night at the house high on drugs. And she's like,
oh,
what is happening? Like her whole life literally exploded. Nobody saw it coming. There were no signs. It didn't get caught by the mental health professionals, didn't get caught in any background checks. He'd never been in trouble. Like nobody could have seen this coming, right? But long story short, she unmatched, she dealt with her life situation and she actually came back to our agency 2 years later after she divorced, after she was through everything legally, emotionally, everything was stable again in her life 2 years later. And she actually ended up having a successful journey because surrogacy was still something she wanted to do. But it's one of those things where you could do everything right and life could shock you and surprise you. And you just have to do the best thing you can do in the moment and deal with it as much as you can. And obviously, that assumes that we're doing all the right things up front to catch these things
Absolutely.
as much as we can, right? But yeah, I think we've all had a situation where something just shocked us and we're like, okay, what do we do now to pick up the pieces?
Right. And that's where I think people, fail to realize how important it is to have an agency.
Hmm.
And that's why it makes me so sad when someone won't value the agency's role. And well, everything's going to be great as long as there's no problems. Absolutely. And that's the life in general, right?
Right.
It's like what happens when there is a problem? Who is going to be there to help support you through these difficult challenges of a journey that you've never experienced? Like who for both? I'm not just saying it for the parent, I'm saying it for the surrogate too. What if life things happen with your child, with a family member, with your spouse, with your job that you weren't expecting? And now you have this journey and parents that were feeling a certain way that you have nobody there to help mitigate all this.
Right. Yep. You have to really go into it almost expecting things to go wrong and doing everything you can to prevent them from going wrong. But you almost have to, I always tell people like just expect that there are going to be bumps in the road. It's just going to happen. Let's just do our best to make them like little bumps and not huge bumps.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on that. When we have a parent and we're talking about the journey and the next steps, we always make sure to remind them this. And for some reason, it really shocks them every time when we
Hmm.
say, this could happen. Like, what do you mean? Because they always have
Yeah.
this image. Oh, if I pick a married surrogate, nothing's going to happen. Well,
Right.
no, things could happen.
Yeah.
Or if I pick a single surrogate, she doesn't have to deal. What if she meets somebody? She can
Right.
meet the love of her life mid-journey.
Right.
Those things could happen, and that's just something you're gonna have to deal with. That's part of the
Hmm.
journey. So we do the
Hmm.
same, Carrie.
Hmm.
We actually tell them the worst things that could exactly
Right.
what would happen either
Right.
way because they have this idea in their
Mhm.
head that if I do this one thing, everything will be okay, and that's not correct.
Right. Well, and also on the flip side, things can happen on the parents' side. Like
For
you could
sure.
have married parents who get divorced during the journey,
Yes.
or one of them's unfaithful, or one of them loses a job,
Right.
right? Like things can happen in anyone's lives. We're all human. The moms that I cared for got divorced right after the birth, and I didn't know for like 6 months because they didn't want to upset me postpartum. They didn't tell me. Both sides of the coin. And surrogates cannot predict that they're going to get a perfect intended parent or intended parents and vice versa. And no one should expect that, right? So,
No,
um,
absolutely. I 100% agree with you. We've had parents who have gone through a divorce during the journey, and that actually we've had it happen twice. Has
mhm,
not been a nightmare. It was
mhm,
pretty smooth.
mhm,
And I think it's because they had already discussed it. We had nobody fighting over like who's
mhm.
keeping, like it was previously discussed. I think that's why it went well. So
Right.
we did have those cases, and the surrogate understood it. I'm sure she was bummed for them,
Yeah.
but it wasn't where they were fighting, you know,
Right.
regarding who kept the embryos or the baby. So those were pretty smooth for us, but I can see how that could be a nightmare case if
Mhm.
you have parents getting divorced and they both want the pregnancy and they're
Yeah.
both trying to go through a legal battle, and the poor surrogate's in the middle of all this, trying to handle like
Mhm.
the legal aspect, the emotional aspect. That could totally be a nightmare for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, do you have another nightmare case that you'd like to share with us?
I do.
Mhm.
And this one is overbearing couple.
Mhm.
So this couple, again, we try to do the best we can with screening a couple and making sure we educate them on the things that can happen.
Mhm.
This was a male female couple from Europe.
Mhm.
and they were very kind, very sweet and very kind.
Mhm.
No like concerns initially to match what was everything was good. It was once the surrogate got pregnant.
Mhm.
It's like everything changed. And it
Yeah.
wasn't that they were ever like, it was never me. It
Yeah.
was always very kind, the nicest way asking things, but the surrogate was an absolute overshare, like to the extreme where it was
Mhm.
just detrimental for the
Right.
relationship. Um, she would even share like, oh, I'm doing this new skincare routine, would even share it. And she's like, oh, this has that, things
Mhm.
that were probably okay, but she was worried about
Right.
everything. Oh, I went hiking with my family. Oh, where did you go? How
Mhm.
long did you hike? It was just like every aspect of her life where I think what the surrogate was craving was to build a close relationship. But it wasn't her fault. The parents were just so overbearing and they didn't see it.
Right.
We tried a few times to talk to them and say, hey, this is, you need to trust her. Oh no, but she's fine sharing. She's the one who's look, here's a screenshot. She like, yeah, but you're being a bit overbearing. So it got pretty bad towards
Mhm.
it lasted probably mid-pregnancy, I would say. No, a little past mid-pregnancy. Around
Mhm.
30 weeks. That's when the surrogate felt it, where it
Yeah.
was so much for her. They were probably texting multiple times a day. There's an every day. I'm assuming it was probably multiple times a day. And it
Mhm.
became a lot for her.
Right.
So when she decided to speak up after us giving her several notices before, hey, like we're seeing these red flags, we're seeing these concerns, her saying,
Mhm.
no, it's fine. No, I'm sharing. I just want to have this close relationship. But this is a
Yeah.
recipe for a disaster. And I don't think it was her. I think she was craving something that it was the wrong couple for that.
Yeah.
And we could not have seen that even as an agency. When we
Sure.
matched them, we thought they were a match made in heaven, that
Yeah.
everything was great. They both wanted this really close relationship. They wanted to like get together after the birth, visit each other. They wanted this
Mhm.
perfect journey.
Mhm.
And it turned out to be a total nightmare starting about, I think it was about 30 weeks, I want to say,
Wow.
because that's when she realized, I think she just got overwhelmed. It was too
Yeah.
much. I'm sure she was tired. It was towards the end, more
Sure.
appointments. It was too much for her. I remember her calling and
Mhm.
saying, I can't do this anymore. Like this, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
So we had to schedule as an agency weekly phone calls with all parties. So they
Wow.
would not communicate unless they were on a video call with us.
Mm.
And we try to find a middle ground that worked for everyone. So we
Yeah.
asked her, what about, we tried different things. And finally, we landed on we're going to be on a video call with your case manager, the
Mhm.
parents, and you. And we're
Right.
all going to meet together and discuss during that time only. And there's no other communication.
Mhm.
So we were able to mitigate it, but it was pretty bad. We were going to be
Mhm.
pretty sad if we weren't going to be able to help them because they were both great people, very nice and kind,
Yeah.
but it was just becoming a total nightmare. And
Mhm.
it's sad because you would have asked me initially, I would have said, "Oh, this is great. This is a
Yeah.
perfect match. Goodness,
Mhm.
couldn't have been better." Their match like meeting was great. We have them do a group session with the mental health professional. It went fantastic. They were both on the same page. They
Mhm.
wanted the same things. It was
Mhm.
wonderful. And it ended up being a nightmare. So we were able to mitigate it with that weekly once, but I don't think either parties ever felt like it was good. Like it was good
Yeah.
enough, I guess. At
Yeah.
the end, they ended up not having a relationship once the
Mhm.
baby was born.
Yeah.
So we had them meet every week, but I felt like both parties felt it was awkward. It was
Mhm.
awkward. It was more like a business transaction at that point. We were just trying to, make it work for everybody.
Mhm.
She felt like she had lost that connection with them. They felt like they were not really involved with the pregnancy. Even though we
Mhm.
made it work, it still wasn't great.
Yeah.
And that was very, very disappointing. I think as an agency and for the case managers, they take that very hard because they want to have good journeys. They
Mhm.
want everybody to enjoy the process and be able to look back and say, wow, I had a great journey and I had this great relationship.
Right.
About, I would say 98% of our journeys go great and they
Mhm.
all have end with a good relationship.
Right.
So it's very disappointing for things like this to happen, especially when
Mhm.
you thought you were going into it with, the best, I mean, the best match possible and it didn't
Right.
work out. So even having an agency and working so hard, still things can happen like this.
Hmm.
That
That's right.
it wasn't a good match, and we could not have seen that early on. It was impossible to view that.
Right. And it's because human behavior can't always be predicted, right? And we can't always predict what's going to trigger someone once a pregnancy happens, or maybe the pregnancy's fine, but then there's a complication, or, you just never know what's going to trigger someone's fears or trauma or whatever it is. And, we do our best, like you said, to mitigate that with mental health support and trying to screen as vigorously as we can up front. But at the end of the day, human nature is human nature. And it sounds like you guys did the best thing you could do, which was facilitate that communication in a way where everyone got what they needed. But that's the best that you can do.
Yeah, it is. It really was. That really stand out because they were all just great. They were all, I mean,
Hmm.
the surrogate was fantastic, just
Hmm.
had the right heart, had the best intentions, and so did the parents. They
Yeah.
didn't see how they were being overbearing,
Hmm.
um, and she didn't see that they were a bit more anxious and worried.
Yeah.
So oversharing wasn't the best. Maybe
Right.
sharing a little less, and so it was. They both were great. It was just
Yeah.
the match wasn't, you know.
Yeah. Communication styles were different for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Mhm.
Well, so tell us, as we sort of wrap up this conversation, tell us some things that you think that surrogates or parents or both can do to try and avoid a nightmare scenario on their journey.
I think it's all in the matching for sure.
Hmm.
I think we see most of it. I would say 95% of the issues can be mitigated during that.
Hmm.
Our our matching coordinator has an extensive list of things. So she meets with both parties individually before the match. Then she meets with them together. And
Hmm.
the match can be anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. So
Hmm.
we go through a whole list of things that we have learned throughout the years that are things we have to have conversations on. We
Yep.
ask for examples and we have them share their support, or what if this happens? What would we do? Or what would, like, just examples of things.
Hmm.
And it really gets them thinking of, oh wow, I never even thought about that. Like what would I do in that case? So
Yeah.
it is very helpful for me. That's one of the biggest things you can do is go very prepared into your matching and make sure you're educated. But I
Hmm.
don't know. I don't know what advice I could actually. I'm thinking about independent journeys. Like, how could I advise them? It's just
Hmm.
I'm not sure if I have the right advice because I come
Hmm.
from an agency's
Yeah.
perspective. So
Yeah.
for me, it's like I assume most agencies that are reputable have this and are able to create the best matches possible because that's really going to help the journey. I
Hmm.
feel like if you can do a good job of matching the right parent with the right surrogate and what the surrogate needs for her support during the journey,
Hmm.
you're more likely to have a wonderful experience and
Hmm.
not deal with any nightmares. Of course, you can
Right.
only mitigate what you can, but that is the best. So I'm not, it's a bummer that I didn't even think about independent journeys until right now, how they can maybe spend a lot of time talking,
Hmm.
a lot of
Lots
time
of talking. Yeah.
communicating, and have multiple video calls before you start this journey and
Hmm.
try to think of all the things that happened during a pregnancy and discuss them.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I just appreciate you sharing with us today, and hopefully, our listeners and our viewers learned a few things about what they can do to have a safer and more happy journey. So, thank you very much.
Mary, it was a pleasure to be on this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the Normalized Surrogacy Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Carey Flamer-Powell, and I want to again thank my special guest, Maria, for joining me for this chat today. You can learn more about Maria and International Surrogacy Center via the links in this podcast. Be sure to check us out at surrogacymentor.com and take our easy 2-minute quiz on our website to learn more about becoming a surrogate. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and learn how to have a safe, ethical, and enjoyable surrogacy journey. Talk to you next time.